The savannah, an ancient, indifferent heart, bled its last light into the vast, bruised canvas of dusk. A revered quiet descended, thick and heavy, absorbing the last chirps of daybirds, the rustle of fading winds through tall acacia. Only the distant, rhythmic thrum of unseen life echoed, a pulse too faint to disturb the profound stillness. Deep within a shadowed kopje, Kira, a lioness whose tawny fur once gleamed with the vibrant authority of a matriarch, moved with the slow, almost skeletal grace of a sleepwalker. She pushed through a curtain of thorny scrub, her powerful shoulders brushing against rock, entering the cool, cavernous space of her den. It was silent. Empty. The familiar, comforting scent of her own blood and earth remained, but the sharp, sweet tang of her cubs, the playful warmth of their bodies nestled against hers, was gone. No tiny, clumsy steps scraped against the stone floor. No soft, purring sighs filled the air. Only the echoing, hollow confirmation of her profound loss. She lowered her immense form, collapsing onto the cool earth. Her head, heavy with unspoken sorrows, settled onto her paws. A queen without a kingdom, a mother without her young. Her breath, deep and ragged, was the only sound, a stark counterpoint to the silence that had swallowed her world whole. Hours blurred into the deepening twilight, until a new sound, impossibly fragile, impossibly sharp, pierced the veil of her desolation. A faint, piercing cry. It was not the mournful call of a night predator, nor the panicked squeal of prey. It was a sound that did not belong to the calculus of her grief, a sound that cut through the numbness. A pure, helpless demand for life. Kira lifted her head, her amber eyes locking onto the direction of the sound, a flicker of something other than grief in them for the first time. The savannah, now steeped in the deepest indigo of twilight, pulsed with 100 invisible lives, but Kira heard only one. That cry. It pulled at something buried deep within her, a dormant chord vibrating with desperate resonance. She moved, a tawny shadow melting through the tall, dry grass. Her every muscle was coiled, prepared, moving with the inherited grace of 1,000 generations of hunters, yet her purpose was blurred, undefined. The scent on the air was not that of gazelle or wildebeest. It was fresh. Young. And beneath the primal scent of an animal, lay an unfamiliar tang of utter vulnerability. She crested a small, sun-baked rise, the last remnants of daylight painting the horizon in muted purples. Below, in a shallow depression, a tiny, trembling form. Elam. A newborn elephant calf. Alone. So small, he looked like a grey stone abandoned by some ancient god, save for the incessant tremor that shook his 2 large ears and fragile legs. He was barely born, lost, and raw. A gasp, small and broken, escaped him. A moment of supreme tension descended. The vast, ancient stage of the savannah seemed to hold its breath. Predator. Prey. The unyielding laws of nature hung in the balance, suspended by a single, impossible tableau. Every fiber of Kira's being, every instinct honed by millennia of survival, screamed its dictates. Charge. Kill. Sustain. Yet, she did not. Instead of the inevitable, earth-shaking lunge, there was stillness. A profound, unnatural pause. Kira studied the calf, her head cocked, the deep-set amber of her eyes unblinking. Her powerful body, a weapon of unparalleled efficiency, remained utterly motionless. Her instincts were in a state of civil war, a silent, internal roar against the dictates of her own nature. She saw his helplessness. She saw the echoing emptiness of her own den. A predator. A baby. An impossible choice. Elam, in his terror, let out another small cry. Kira takes a step forward, not with aggression, but with a strange, deliberate calm. The step Kira took was not a stalk, but a measured advance, a slow, deliberate movement that carried no threat. She began to circle Elam, her powerful frame a soft, tawny crescent around his trembling grey bulk. Her body language shifted with each careful paw placement, shedding the taut readiness of a huntress for something entirely different. Her head, once lowered for the kill, was now held level, her gaze unwavering as she studied the vulnerable calf. She became a living wall, an unspoken barrier between Elam and the indifferent, encroaching twilight. A low sound rumbled deep in Kira's chest, a vibration more than a growl, a soft, purring thrum that was the chuff, the intimate greeting a lioness reserves for her own young. It was a sound that had been absent from her world for too long, a forgotten language that now found a new, impossible recipient. Elam, still terrified, flinched at first, then, hearing no aggression, lifted his trunk hesitantly, his small eyes wide with confusion and a fragile spark of something akin to wonder. Miles away, the hum of technology filled a small, climate-controlled mobile research station. On a bank of screens, data streams flickered, but one image dominated, a high-definition drone feed showing the impossible tableau. Dr. Aries Thorne, a man whose life was built on understanding the precise, brutal calculus of the wild, stared, his jaw slack. His face, usually a mask of professional competence, was etched with utter bewilderment. He leaned closer to the monitor, a hand rubbing his temples. "Zoom in, Biko." "Max Optical," he murmured, his voice quiet, disbelieving, barely audible against the software of hard drives. A younger assistant, Biko, complied, his own expression a mirror of Thorne's awe. The image sharpened, showing Kira's massive head nudging Elam's flank, a gesture so tender it seemed to defy every law Dr. Thorne had ever studied. "This is impossible," Thorne breathed again, the phrase a scientific blasphemy escaping his lips, a testament to the raw, inexplicable emotion unfolding on the screen before him. It was a scene that shattered every paradigm, a mother's heart finding solace in the most improbable of forms. The last sliver of sun vanished, plunging the savannah into a deeper indigo. As night falls, Kira lies down a few feet from Elam, not to sleep, but to watch. The first watch begins. The vast savannah, already a canvas of deep shadows and muted starlight, now pressed in with an almost tangible weight of darkness. Kira lay still, a sentinel of tawny muscle against the earth, her amber eyes reflecting the few distant stars, fixed on the small, trembling form of the calf beside her. But the night was not truly silent. Faintly at first, then growing sharper, carried on the cool night air, came a sound that scraped against the quiet, the manic, cackling calls of hyenas. A shiver, not of fear but of primal alertness, ran through Kira. The scavengers were drawn by the scent of vulnerability, the promise of an easy meal. They were a law unto themselves, a force of opportunism. Slowly, silently, shapes began to coalesce at the edges of the limited moonlight, dark, hunched forms emerging from the tall grass, their eyes glinting with predatory hunger. They sensed the small, lost elephant calf. They moved with a disturbing, disjointed gait, their chattering intensifying, closing the circle. Kira rose. Not as the hollowed-out mother consumed by grief, but as a fury incarnate. Her muscles coiled, her stance shifting from repose to unyielding defense. Her gaze, once clouded by sorrow, was now pure, incandescent resolve. She was no longer a queen without a kingdom, she was a protector. As the lead hyena, a scarred female with cunning eyes, launched forward, Kira met its charge not with a retreat, but with a roar that tore through the night, a sound that shook the very ground. It was a roar of renewed purpose, of uncompromising power, a declaration that this vulnerable calf was hers. A blur of claws and snapping jaws, a whirlwind of tawny fur and desperate grey. Kira was a force of nature unleashed, driving the hyenas back, a low growl rumbling deep in her chest, each swipe of her paw a warning, each lunge a promise of pain. They scattered, surprised by the ferocity, their cackles turning to whimpers as they broke ranks, melting back into the shadows they had come from. She stood for a long moment, muscles still taut, eyes scanning the darkness for any lingering threat, then slowly, deliberately, turned back to Elam. The calf, wide-eyed and terrified, pressed himself against the earth. Kira lowered her head, nudging him gently with her muzzle, a soft, reassuring rumble echoing from her chest. It was a gesture of protection, of comfort. The hyenas retreat into the darkness. Silence returns, but it is a different kind of silence now, one of safety, not emptiness. Dawn broke over the savannah, painting the horizon in bruised purples and fiery oranges, a stark contrast to the darkness Kira had just conquered. Miles away, in a camouflaged observation post, the first weak rays of sun filtered into a tent, illuminating the strained faces of Dr. Aries Thorne and his small team. The previous night's drone footage replayed silently on a monitor, showing Kira's ferocious defense against the hyenas. A collective sigh, hushed and reverent, filled the air as the lioness, a tawny blur of righteous fury, drove the scavengers into retreat. Their expressions were a complex tapestry of awe and profound concern, a silent testament to the impossible scene they had just witnessed. "All right," Thorn finally said, his voice a low rumble, breaking the stillness. "Thoughts?" Mara, a young field assistant, spoke first, her voice edged with disbelief. "It's extraordinary, Ares. I've never seen anything like it. She's protecting him." "Protecting him, yes," Thorn agreed, rubbing his temples. "But what does that mean for us?" "Protocol is clear: non-interference. We observe, we document. We don't actively participate." Samuel, the team's season tracker, leaned forward. "But doctor, the calf. He's a baby. What if he needs actual intervention? Food? Water? His herd isn't here." Thorn turned from the screen, his gaze sweeping over his team. "And if we interfere, what then? We've seen her protect him. We don't know what chain reaction that sets off. We are witnessing something that rewrites the rules. To intervene now would be its own kind of violence." He paused, the weight of his words hanging in the air. "Our job is to understand, not to impose our will on this." "Not yet. We continue observation. Rigorous, minute by minute. We document every interaction, every struggle, every triumph." There was a moment of quiet reflection, then a series of nods. The team, professional and committed, became the silent guardians of this impossible family, documenting every fragile, groundbreaking moment. Kira, oblivious to her human audience, moved with Elam. Thorn zoomed in on Kira gently nudging the calf toward a hidden spring. He removed his glasses, rubbing his eyes, a man of science facing a miracle. Days folded into weeks, each one weaving a stronger thread between the unlikely pair, painting the savannah with colors of impossible harmony. The sun rose and set, painting the vast plains in hues of molten gold and bruised purple, marking the passage of time. Kira, once a creature hollowed out by silence, now moved with a new rhythm, her powerful strides measured by Elam's smaller, more deliberate steps. Her grief, once a raw, gaping wound, was slowly, imperceptibly, being filled by the quiet, demanding presence of the growing calf. She had rediscovered a gentle, nurturing side of herself, a purpose rekindled not by blood, but by profound, unexpected need. She taught him the rhythm of the wild, which patches of grass were sweetest, where the freshest water pooled after a distant rain. With a nudge of her head, she'd guide his curious trunk to tender shoots, watching as he tentatively sampled the new tastes. Elam, emboldened by her steadfast presence, grew more playful. He would lower his head and attempt to push the unmovable lioness, a game he never won but tirelessly repeated, his small tusks barely grazing her fur. Kira would respond with a low, patient rumble, a sound far removed from a predatory growl, a sound of tolerant affection. Later, under the sprawling shade of an acacia tree, they would share naps, the massive tawny predator and the small, grey, growing calf curled in unlikely proximity, a study in impossible harmony. Their communication, a language unspoken yet deeply felt, deepened. Kira's soft rumbles, sometimes a chuff, sometimes a deeper vibration that resonated through the earth, became Elam's anchor in the vastness. In return, Elam's answering trumpets, still high-pitched but gaining strength, were sounds of pure, unquestioning trust, a fragile melody that transcended species. They were no longer merely coexisting, they were interacting, learning, relying. Elam's dependency was obvious, but Kira, too, drew sustenance from this bond, her spirit healing with every shared sunrise, every vigilant night. The sheer visual contrast of them, the magnificent lioness with her powerful frame and the lumbering, increasingly robust elephant calf, was a testament to a bond that defied all logic, all the ancient laws of the savannah. Elam rests his trunk briefly on Kira's back. She does not flinch. She accepts it. They are no longer predator and prey, they are a unit. The bond between Kira and Elam deepened with each passing day, a silent language woven from shared sunrises and vigilant nights. Yet, the savannah, for all its quiet mercies, was never truly still. The wind, carrying whispers of life and death, could also carry warning. One afternoon, a shift in the air, a familiar tang, made Kira's ears swivel. She lifted her head, amber eyes narrowing. On the distant horizon, a line of tawny forms moved with synchronized grace. Her pride. They were on the hunt, their collective instinct drawing them closer to this particular stretch of land, a stretch where an impossibility now resided. The first among them, the lead female, a powerful lioness named Zola, crested a low ridge. Her eyes, sharp and practiced, scanned the landscape, locking onto Kira. A low, questioning rumble vibrated in Zola's chest. Then, her gaze dropped to the small, grey shape nestled beside Kira. Elam. Confusion rippled through the approaching pride. Heads cocked. Growls, uncertain at first, began to ripple through their ranks. This was wrong. This was an abomination. Kira, a mother without cubs, now shielded a creature that should have been a meal. Disbelief turned quickly to aggression. Zola took a step forward, her tail twitching, a challenge in her stance. The tension crackled, raw and ancient. Zola let out a sharp, questioning roar, a command for Kira to explain, to conform. Kira met her gaze, unblinking. She stood, powerful and defiant, placing her body squarely between Elam and her former family. A low, guttural snarl ripped from Kira's throat. It was not a growl of fear, but a roar of absolute protection, a warning. This is mine. He is mine. The message was unmistakable. The pride hesitated, their predatory instincts warring with the shocking sight of their own kind defending prey. Zola, her eyes burning with a mixture of betrayal and incomprehension, snarled again, a final, futile attempt to reclaim their sister. But Kira did not waver. She stood her ground. There was no going back. With a collective shrug of incomprehension and a sense of profound rejection, the pride turned. One by one, they melted back into the tall grass, their shadows lengthening as they disappeared over the ridge, leaving Kira an outcast. She had made her choice. Kira watches them go, the last tie to her old life severed. She turns back to Elam. She is truly alone with him now. The seasons, fickle and relentless, marched on. The golden dust of dry months gave way to the greener blush of a nascent wet season, then receded once more, leaving the savannah to bake under a brazen sun. Elam was no longer the trembling bundle of grey Kira had found. He was bigger, stronger, his legs longer, his trunk more adept at stripping leaves from low branches. His play was rougher, his trumpets deeper, demanding more from the world than a single lioness could provide. Where Kira once guarded a vulnerable infant, she now watched over a rapidly growing juvenile, his massive form becoming less a hidden secret and more a looming challenge. Her vigilance, once absolute, felt increasingly stretched. Her powerful jaws, designed for the quick kill, could not deliver the endless tonnage of roughage his burgeoning appetite demanded. Her strength, so formidable against hyenas, was useless against the crushing weight of a rival bull elephant or the sheer scale of a forest fire. He needed a herd. He needed his own kind. Kira, once an apex predator, was now a constant provider, and the endless pursuit of sustenance for two wildly disparate creatures was beginning to tell. The rich marrow of her existence, once filled with the maternal chase, was now a lean, desperate hunt. She found herself growing thinner, her ribs faintly visible beneath her tawny coat, her energy consumed not just by the hunt, but by the relentless patrol around a creature that, despite their bond, was not equipped to understand the nuances of a lioness's world. The weight of this impossible guardianship pressed down on her, a silent, growing burden. Meanwhile, in the sterile glow of a mobile command unit, miles away, Dr. Aries Thorne leaned closer to his monitor, a tremor of discovery running through him. After weeks of tireless searching, utilizing every resource at their disposal, they had a breakthrough. Thermal imaging, cross-referenced with satellite data and old tracking records, had finally yielded results. "We found her," Thorne murmured, his voice hoarse, pointing to a distinct notch in the tusk of a large female elephant captured on a distant drone feed. Elam's herd. His mother. The screen showed a tightly knit group, moving with the slow, purposeful rhythm of family. The air in the unit became thick with unspoken questions. Thorne turned to his small team, his face etched with a mix of relief and profound regret. We can't let him die, and we can't let her starve trying to protect him. We have to try. We owe it to them. Kira, unaware of the distant human machinations, stood watching Elam attempt to uproot a small acacia tree, his growing strength evident in the straining muscles of his neck. His sheer scale, once almost comical next to her, was now becoming a stark, undeniable fact. He was no longer her baby. A flicker of understanding, cold and sharp, passed through her amber eyes. The unspoken truth hung in the air. The unspoken truth hung in the air, a silent weight beneath the vast savanna sky. Dr. Thorne and his small team moved with the hushed reverence of conspirators in a sacred rite, their vehicle carefully positioned, speakers aimed across the plains. A faint, low thrum began, barely perceptible, a vibration in the earth more than a sound. Then, rising from the speakers, came the distant, rumbling calls of a massive herd. It was a sound ancient and deep, a language of family and belonging that echoed across the miles. Elam's head shot up, his enormous ears swiveling, catching every nuance. He froze, a tiny grey statue, his trunk twitching, tasting the air. He knew that sound. It was the echo of his own kind, a call from a life he had almost forgotten, yet never truly erased from his deepest memory. He looked from the horizon, where the sounds beckoned, to Kira, his protector, his impossible mother. His wide, dark eyes held a raw confusion, a profound tearing. This was the moment of choice, the silent question hanging between them. Kira stood motionless, her amber eyes fixed on him. She saw the longing in his stance, the primal pull of his species. She understood. Her grief had reshaped her, but her love now demanded a sacrifice far greater than any she had made before. It was the purest, most agonizing act of maternal devotion. With a slow, deliberate movement, she nudged Elam with her head, a gentle, insistent push not of rejection, but of profound, selfless acceptance. Go. The single word hung unspoken in the charged air. Elam hesitated for another heartbreaking moment, then, with a small, trumpeting cry, he turned and began to run. His small legs churned across the savannah, gaining speed, driven by an instinct far older than his bond with Kira. She watched him go, a blur of grey disappearing into the shimmering heat haze, toward the invisible source of the calls. Kira turned, retreating with quiet dignity. She climbed a nearby kopje, its rocky crest offering a vantage point over the immense landscape. From there, she watched as Elam reached the distant outline of the elephant herd, a majestic, moving grey mass. The herd opened, a living, breathing embrace. Massive legs enveloped him, trunks reached out, exploring, welcoming. She saw the matriarch, the one with the distinctive tusk, lower her head, a soft rumbling greeting. Elam was home. Kira watched from the hill, a solitary figure against the vast landscape. She lets out a soft, low sound, and then is silent. Months passed. The relentless sun gave way to the drumming rains, washing the savannah clean, then receded once more, leaving a landscape reborn. The cycles of life and death continued, indifferent to individual heartache, yet profoundly shaped by extraordinary moments. In his small, canvas tent, Dr. Aries Thorne traced lines in a worn leather journal. The scientific observations, the endless data points, they filled page after page. But it was the unquantifiable truth that resonated most profoundly within him. We categorize. We define. Predator, prey, mother, orphan, his voice, a quiet narration, began, but the wild, it defies our neat little boxes. It demands that we look beyond instinct, beyond expectation. What we witnessed, it wasn't just survival. It was something far more ancient, more powerful. A love that cut through the very fabric of nature's laws. A lesson in compassion, etched onto the heart of a lioness, and into the soul of a scientist. And Kira? She roamed the vast plains, a solitary queen, indeed. Not broken, as many would have predicted. But reforged. Her hunts were sharp, her movements fluid, her presence a quiet legend whispered across the reserve by those few who knew. She was whole. Not in the way she had been before, with the playful nuzzle of her own cubs, but in a deeper, more profound sense. A purpose, reshaped by love, now lived within her. She was a survivor, yes. But more than that, she was a testament. One dawn, as the first light bled across the sky, painting the clouds in hues of rose and gold, Kira stood atop the familiar hill. The same hill where she had watched her impossible son depart. Her amber eyes, no longer haunted by grief, swept across the horizon. Far in the distance, a grey smudge against the greening plains, was a moving mass. The elephants. Her gaze lingered, not with the ache of loss, but with the quiet warmth of memory. Of a bond that defied definition. Of a love that had reshaped her very being. This was not an emptiness, but a space filled with grace. A peace earned through profound connection and the ultimate act of letting go. The screen fades to black as the narrator concludes, her cubs were gone. But her heart had learned a new way to be a mother. And that is a bond that can never be lost.